On July 31st, Bandai is introducing 6 starter decks, which are reprints of older leaders, but they have new cards within them. So out of these starter decks, which one will be the best for you to get? We'll go over that in the course of this video, but before we do, if you're new to the channel, please make sure to hit that sub button and give the video a thumbs up. It helps out the channel so much. Thank you all for the support. So starting off with the red starter deck, we have a reprint of starter deck 21 Red Luffy Leader. It says Dawn ×1, activate main once per turn, give one of your characters up to 2 rested Dawn cards. This leader has always been somewhat underwhelming in the scope of the meta, but maybe with some of the inclusions in the deck, it actually could be pretty good. Out of the box with the reprints that we have, there's not a lot of value in those, so don't expect to be getting a lot of these starter decks and get value out of the reprints, although there is one deck which we'll get to that has pretty good reprint value. But for the red reprints, the most notable are going to be the 1-cost Nami Searcher, the 0-cost Bad Manners Kick Course, and the 4-cost Frankie 2K. Now all of these cards are pretty cheap as is, but they are pretty good staples in red decks, so you might want to consider that if you don't already have these cards in your bulk. Onto the new cards, we have a 5-cost 3000 power Sanji SR that sets Dawn ×2. This character gains Rush, and then when played, draw 1 card and then play up to 1 character card from your hand with a cost of 5 or less with the Straw Hat Crew trait other than Sanji. I think this card is very specific and it's going to fit well into just a few decks. I think the best one obviously is going to be the starter deck 21 Luffy, which is what this card was made for. Outside of that, we're going to have trouble finding really good room to play this. I think if you're looking to play maybe VV, there's a world where you could actually use this in the VV deck, the red-blue VV. Outside of that though, I don't really see this card doing well in many other decks. Then we have a 5-cost 6000 power Jinbei blocker. It says on play, draw 1 card and then play up to 1 Straw Hat Crew type card with the cost of 1 from your hand. I actually like this card a little bit better than the Sanji SR because I think it has more applicable uses outside of just the starter deck 21 Luffy deck. Of course, with this being able to play a Straw Hat Crew type card could also mean a stage, but it has to be a cost of 1. So that stipulation is a little bit weird to hit, but can be done. I'm not incredibly impressed with this card, but I do think it has more playability outside of starter deck 21 Luffy than the 5-cost Sanji did. Then we have a 2-cost 3000 power Brook that says on the opponent's turn, if you have a total of 3 or more given Dawn cards, this character gains blocker and plus 3000 power. Once again, very specific to starter deck 21 Luffy because starter deck 21 Luffy is very easily able to use that 3 or more given Dawn cards because of the leader ability. So this can be a blocker for 2 cost, which is pretty powerful in that deck. Outside of that though, I think you're going to have a lot of trouble being able to get that stipulation to be a blocker and plus 3000 power without spending Dawn in a way that doesn't really make sense. So this card isn't really that impressive for those reasons. Then the other SR that's included in the deck is the 7-cost 9000 power Luffy. It says if you have a total of 3 or more given Dawn cards on your field, this character gains Rush, and then on play, give up to one of your opponent's characters minus 1000 power during this turn for each Straw Hat Crew type cards you control. That can include your leader, that can include this card, other Straw Hat characters on the field, a stage, maybe even the Luffy Dawn card could count. I'm kidding, that actually does not count. Just trying to flex that off. But with this card, I do think that it has a lot of applications outside of just the starter deck 21 Luffy. I think you're not going to be able to give this Rush in a lot of scenarios, but I do like the fact that you can play this down and at least get the minus 1000 power based off of itself to a character on the opponent's side of the field. I think that the one thing that is consistent with the card game is that there will always be Straw Hat Crew type support. So I think that because of that, this card will have more playability as sets go on. And then finally, we have a 1-cost stage that says on play, look at the top 5 cards of your deck, reveal up to 1 card with the Straw Hat Crew trait, and then add it to your hand, and then place the remaining cards at the bottom of your deck in any order. So a stage that is a searcher, very good here, and then activate main. You may rest this stage and then grant up to 1 rested Dawn card to one of your Luffy cards. So within this deck, really powerful because every turn you're able to get your leader ability for just having this stage on the field. So you get a search off with it, and then you can use this to use your leader ability. Powerful there. It's really good outside of starter deck 21 as well. I think immediately red-green Luffy comes to mind because this can at least let you find pieces that you need for that deck. And then on top of that, you're able to use your leader ability every turn after that. So I think this card is really strong for those reasons and probably one of the best cards to come out of this deck because of the fact that it's just flexible in what you can use it for. A couple of decks that you can upgrade with the red starter deck would be the Tony Chopper from OPO 8, a red-green leader that says activate main once per turn, put up to 1 rested Dawn on each of your animal or Drum Kingdom type characters. It also has Straw Hat Crew in its typing. So with this ability, it plays pretty well into the 7-cost Luffy or other cards that require given Dawn on the field. Dragon from OPO 7 is also a pretty good contender for upgrades here. Activate main once per turn, give a total of 2 of your currently attached Dawn to one of your characters. So this can go pretty well with the 5-cost Sanji that we talked about earlier. The new Ace from OP16 could use the 7-cost Luffy because they can just immediately give it Rush, so you don't have to have given Dawn for that card to have Rush in this deck. And the deck that I think benefits the most from this starter deck coming out is going to be red-green Luffy. Being able to have that stage give you your leader ability every turn is really strong. Sometimes there's turns where it might be a little bit difficult or awkward to use your leader ability plus also play something on curve, but the stage allows you to have some more flexibility. On top of that, you have support with the 7-cost cost 9,000 power Luffy, which you might not always be able to give that rush, but you are able to at least trade into the board a little bit easier with that card in your deck. Out of the box, I think this deck is pretty solid, but it doesn't have enough of the combo pieces to really take advantage of the 5-cost Luffy. I think that just in general, the leader effect is really strong in some of these limited environments. Being able to use your Dawn most efficiently and putting 2 of it on a small character can be quite annoying for a lot of decks to deal with. And of course, with the 7-cost Rush Luffy in this deck, really powerful at taking back the board or just applying pressure. So I do think that this deck is worth at least considering for maybe a deck tournament. As far as longevity or playability of these cards go, I would not bet against Straw Hat Crew typing, so I would probably just grab this deck as a safe measure for future sets, just in case there are other decks that come out that could use these cards in them. That's always the case. These cards might not seem like a lot at first, but eventually there are decks that come out that are able to use a lot of the cards within starter decks that come out previously. So I would grab this just based off of the fact that it is a Straw Hat Crew type deck. On to Green Zoro. This is a reprint of the OP12 Green Zoro that says Dawn ×3, activate main. Once per turn, if this leader has battled your opponent's character during this turn, set this leader as active. Then this card cannot attack characters with an original cost of 7 or less during this turn. When this leader first came out, it was really terrifying to go against because it could answer the board and also really hit hard at life. So you kind of had to decide what to protect, either characters or your life. But anyway, this leader is back with a new starter deck, and a lot of the reprints that we are getting are very much core to this deck itself. In fact, most of these cards are core cards for Zoro, and they're not going to be expensive to get as singles, but if you don't have anything as a basis, this deck at least gets you like halfway there. Out of these reprints, I think the 1-cost Hiyori and the 5-cost X-Drake are probably going to be the best to use outside of decks of Zoro, but once again, these are not very expensive cards to get, so you might want to just grab singles instead. For new cards, we have a 1-cost Kinemon, which is a 1-cost 2,000 power character with a 1k counter. On play, you may rest one of your slash attribute leaders or Dawn cards, draw 2 cards, and trash 1 card from your hand. Pretty nice green staple going forward for at least slash attribute leaders. Being able to further dig into the deck is always a great thing, especially in green. Next, we have the 5-cost 6,000 power green SR Odin. On play, draw 1 card up to one of your opponent's characters with an original cost of 6 or less. Cannot be rested until the end of your opponent's next end phase. So a great card to come in and answer decks like Purple Enel. With the secret 6-cost Purple Enel being such a menace in that deck, being able to prevent it from attacking is pretty nice. Of course, usually with green, the way the mechanics work is once the character is rested, then you can interact with it, but this at least prevents that character from being rested in the first place, and it's an original cost of 6 or less, so in case Purple Enel does buff their characters up with their own events, it doesn't matter because it says original cost. This card is quite impressive and one of the reasons why you're going to want to get the green starter deck. For the other SR in the deck, we have the 6-cost 7,000 power Mihawk. Your turn, when this character becomes rested, draw 1 card and trash 1 card from your hand, and then on play, if your leader has the slash attribute type, play up to 1 Perona or slash attribute type character with a cost of 5 or less from your hand. This is a very specific card because you have to have slash attribute, so along the lines of the Kinemon, you're going to have to only put this in your slash attribute type leaders, so it does have some limited playability. And on top of that, this card is kind of battling the spot of the 6-cost blocker law, which almost plays similar effects in bringing out another character. I'd argue that the 6-cost blocker law is better in most instances because of the fact that it has flexibility on being a defender or an attacker. I think this card is worth trying out because of the fact that when it becomes rested, you get to filter your hand, which in green is also a very powerful thing you can do. Drawing cards is always wanted and needed in decks, and obviously filtering out is also a nice secondary effect there. So this is worth trying out, but I don't think it's going to fit into any decks immediately or be an auto include, but over time it could, you never know. Then on to the 4-cost 5,000 power Rayleigh. It has a 1k counter. It says if your leader has the slash attribute, this character gains rush character, and then on play, rest up to 2 of your opponent's characters with a cost of 2 or less. I think this is the best card to come out of the green starter decks. For a lot of green decks, and more specifically green Mihawk, their even curve is just so bad. On 4, there's not a lot you can do. You can play searchers or you can play the 4-cost blocker Zoro, but this Rayleigh at least is another option to put into that deck. Really strong because of the fact that you can trade into the board against some of the more aggressive decks like green-blue Luffy or even Purple Enel. Getting rid of their smaller bodies is pretty nice here. So I think that this Rayleigh is a card you're going to want to get, and in my opinion, probably the best one out of the starter deck. And then finally, we have a 1-cost 2,000 power 2k counter Zoro that says rush character, and then on play, if your leader has the slash attribute, rest up to one of your opponent's characters with a cost of 2 or less. I think this card is probably going to be included in decks like Zoro and Mihawk, but I don't think that this is a card a lot of people are super excited about. Probably just going to replace another 2k in the deck. The fact that it has rush characters a little bit better than like maybe Scratchman Apu, for example, but I think that this card is not super exciting, but I do think it is 2k that's probably going to take the place of others instead. Some decks you can upgrade that benefit from this green starter deck coming out include blue, green, Zoro, and Sanji. I think that the fact that this has slash attribute in its types means that it can use some of the cards we talked about, especially the 4-cost Rayleigh and even the 5-cost Odin. Green, yellow, Law could also use some of the cards we talked about because it is also a slash attribute leader. I think that the best card to come out of that one will be the 2K Zoro for this deck, but you could use any of the other cards we also mentioned. Red, green, Odin also comes to mind because he can use the 5-cost Odin in tandem with 4-cost Hiyori, so being able to bring out a 5-cost character on turn 2 and then use your leader ability the next turn, pretty powerful overall, although this leader doesn't really see much play anyway, and I doubt it will because of this starter deck, but I think that there is potential because of the new 5-cost Odin. And then finally, the clear winner here for this green starter deck is green Mihawk. In fact, a lot of people have been talking about that this is actually a green Mihawk starter deck in disguise, and it's not actually a Zoro starter deck, which is fair because I think pretty much every card that has come out for this starter deck applies very well to green Mihawk, and in some instances better than green Zoro. So if you're playing this leader, it's definitely worth experimenting with all of the cards that are coming out for this starter deck and see which fit best. I think Rayleigh is obviously the clear include there, but the 5-cost Odin actually could have some play as well. Some decks are starting to add in the 4-cost Hiyori to be able to play that earlier, which I don't necessarily agree with, but it is an option you can include in this deck. Out of the box, I think this deck is pretty powerful, being able to just trade into the board pretty easily with your leader ability, and then also having the core of what makes green Zoro good, which is essentially 5-cost Tashigi in this deck. I think if you're choosing decks to play at a starter deck tournament, this one is definitely also worth considering. Probably a little bit better than red Luffy in my opinion, just because your leader ability innately removes bodies off the board by swinging into them, and also you can go pretty wide with some of the other contents of the deck. So I think that this is probably one of the better decks to choose for a starter deck tournament. As far as impact on the meta, I don't think there's going to be anything incredibly impactful like the Bonnie starter deck that we got many sets ago, where we had the 10-cost Law and Beppo that we see being played to this day. Yet again, I think the 4-cost Rayleigh is going to be a card that we'll see over time, but I don't think this deck is going to incredibly impact the meta as we go along. We'll have to see though, because in OP17 there is a green Shanks deck coming out, so that one will very likely be slash attribute type, meaning that it will take advantage of the cards in this deck pretty well. Onto the blue starter deck, we have Kuzan, which is a reprint from OP12. When you trash cards from your hand due to your Navy card's effects, you may draw an equal number of cards that were trashed due to that effect. Its generic game plan is trying to fill the board with a lot of 8,000 power bodies by the time you get to your 8 Dawn turn, but with this starter deck, there's ways to actually do that a little bit earlier. For the reprints of this deck, there's nothing crazy worth of value. Once again, as very similar to the green starter deck, this is very targeted towards blue Kuzan. A lot of the staples in that deck are included in the starter deck here, so if you don't have any of these at all and you're wanting to start off with, this is a very good grab because it gets you pretty much halfway there with the staples that includes for blue Kuzan. Nothing crazy here that I really want to call out because most of these cards are very hard targeted towards blue Kuzan and you don't see these in play outside of that deck. Starting off with the new cards, we have a 2-cost Kobe blocker. It says on play you may trash 1 card from your hand and draw 1 card. So with the Kuzan ability, you're drawing 2 here. Very strong in that deck, but I think this is actually a pretty strong blue staple going forward as well. If you're trying to find room to fill in a blue deck, this card could be considered because it's just generically good. If it was draw 1 then trash 1, it would be a little bit better, but being able to filter your hand off of a 2-cost blocker is always a great thing here. So I think this is a card you're going to want to pick up outside of the starter deck, and it's applicable to pretty much any blue deck. Next up, we have a 4-cost 5,000 power Sakazuki that says when attacking, you may trash 1 card from your hand. If your opponent has 6 or more cards in their hand, your opponent trashes 1 card from their hand. On KO, play up to 1 Navy type character with a cost of 4 or less from your hand. This card isn't really that impressive, only really having good application within the blue Kuzan deck in my opinion. You could run it in blue-black Sakazuki, but I think it's just better in blue Kuzan, and on your 4-Dawn turn, I think you're going to want to be playing other cards instead, so I wouldn't really want to include this even in the blue Kuzan deck. You're probably not going to want this card. Then we have a 2-cost 3,000 power 2K counter Smoker that says on play, you may trash 1 card from your hand, place up to 2 of your opponent's characters with a cost of 2 or less at the bottom of the owner's deck. With these starter decks, we're definitely seeing the anti-2-cost or lower hate here, so I think that this card is pretty solid in a lot of blue decks because it's not tied to any specific archetype, so you could run this in a lot of other blue decks. Would you want to though, because trashing a card and getting rid of 2-cost or lower characters could come in handy against blue-green Luffy or purple Linnell, but you're not always going to want to rip your hand size in order to do that, and also on top of that, getting rid of a 2K kind of hurts. So this is a card you might want to consider, but definitely not an auto include in some decks. Then onto the SRs, we have the 6 cost 6,000 power 2K Borsalino. It says if a card from your hand has been trashed through an effect during this turn, give this card in your hand -3 cost, and it also has blocker on it. I think this card is a staple in a lot of blue decks going forward, especially decks that are centered around or have mechanics where they can trash cards from hand. I think that you're going to want to include this just because of the flexibility here. Having a 3 cost blocker or having a 2K in hand is always nice. It's very reminiscent of the starter deck Shank's Red Uta 2K counter, which can become a blocker for cheap. So I think you're going to definitely want to get the starter deck just based off of this, although you could argue just get the singles for this one in your set. I think this is one of the best cards to come out of the starter decks though because of the flexibility here. And then the best card for Kuzan himself is the 6 cost 6,000 power Garp. It says on play, if your leader has the Navy type, play up to 1 blue Navy type character with 8,000 power or less other than Garp from your hand. So you're able to play out an 8,000 power body and the 6,000 power body on 6, which you didn't really have this type of combo previously for this deck. Typically you have to wait till your 8 Dawn turn to be able to cheat out 2 bodies, but you can do it on 6 now, and you can also do it on 8 as well if you want to. So going 4 wide in 2 turns is very powerful, especially when the bodies are as tall as they are in this deck. Outside of Blue Kuzan, I don't necessarily think that this is a card going to be included in other decks. You could find room for it in maybe Blue-Black Sakazuki, but I think yet once again, this starter deck is very targeted towards Blue Kuzan. Some decks that can benefit from this starter deck coming out include Blue-Black Sakazuki because he is a blue Navy type leader, and he also has ways to have discard or cycle through the deck. So you might want to get a little bit spicy with this leader and this deck. Blue Jinbei is also something you might want to include as well because he can take really good advantage of that new Borsalino blocker. And the same thing applies to Rebecca from OP15 as well. She has a fair amount of cards that require discard from her hand, so the Borsalino is actually a pretty good card in that deck as well. But I do think that the clear winner of the blue starter deck is Kuzan, so it was made for him, so it makes the most sense that he's going to get the most benefit from it. I think being able to get out a slew of bodies on 6 and then also on 8 can make this leader quite overwhelming for some opponents, but will it be good enough to top tournaments? I don't think so. I am excited to see this leader pop up a lot more though. Out of the box, I do think that this starter deck is pretty powerful, having access to the 6 cost Kuzan, which can freeze a unit from attacking. Being able to draw through your deck with your leader ability is also very impactful. I think that the fact that you're able to just cycle through your deck with your leader ability in a limited environment is very impactful. So this is definitely one that you might want to consider if you are playing a starter deck battle tournament. This one not really having a lot of top end doesn't hurt it too much because of the fact that you're able to, at least in the mid game, establish a pretty wide board and then get tempo from there with either the 5 cost Ice Time or, like I said, the 6 cost Kuzan. Will this deck have an impact on the meta? I don't really think so. I do think that some of the cards, like I mentioned, like the Borsalino, are going to be cards that will have as staples going forward. So for that reason alone, I think that this deck is worth getting, but I don't think that it will immediately impact the meta. On to the purple starter deck, which supports OP11 Katakuri. His ability reads, when attacking on opponent's attack once per turn, Dawn -1, look at the top card of your opponent's deck, then this leader gains 1,000 power during this battle. I think this deck is in the very similar boat as Blue Kuzan, where it has an inherently strong engine or just a generically good ability, and on top of that, the support that is built around it is pretty solid, but I just think that the meta is unkind to it. So will the starter deck actually benefit it? I think it actually helps this deck quite a lot. Going over the reprints, very similarly to Blue Kuzan or any of the other ones, there's nothing really worth of value here and nothing you couldn't get for cheap outside of the starter deck. But if you are building this from nothing, from scratch, this is just a great way to at least get a handful of the cards that you're going to need for that deck. So if you're looking to build this out and you have nothing right now, then you might want to get this. As far as the new cards go, there's a new 5 cost 7,000 power Katakuri that says your turn once per turn. When a Dawn card on your field is returned to your Dawn deck, if your leader has the Big Mom Pirates type, add up to 2 Dawn cards from your Dawn deck and rest them. And then on KO, play up to 1 character card with 8,000 power or less from your hand. This card is incredibly impactful for this deck specifically. I think it's a great card for Purple Katakuri because of the fact that you're using your leader ability every turn to then see the top card of the opponent's deck, but you minusing Dawn every turn definitely hurts. Having ways to get that Dawn back, especially with this 5 cost Katakuri, will definitely help the deck at least be able to get to 10 pretty easily. The on KO is actually pretty impactful as well because if your opponent chooses to get rid of this character, you have a bunch of other characters that can replace it pretty easily. The best one being the 8 cost 8,000 power Katakuri blocker, which which is not included in the starter deck, but a very much needed piece for this deck overall. Next, we have a 4-cost 5,000 power Cracker that says on play, if your leader has the Big Mom Pirates type, add up to 1 Dawn card from your Dawn deck and rest it, then KO up to one of your opponent's characters with a cost of 2 or less. Yet again, we're seeing the 2-cost or less hate here. Very good in this deck because there's not a lot of interaction in purple Katakuri. Also pretty solid in purple Yellow Pudding as well, but definitely a card you're going to want to include in purple Katakuri. Then we have a 1-cost 2,000 power 2k counter in Brûlée. On play, look at the top 3 cards of your deck and reveal up to 1 Big Mom Pirates type card and add it to your hand, then place the rest at the bottom of your deck in any order. So if you need it as a 2k, awesome. If you need it as a searcher, love that. Great flexibility here. And then for the other SR in the deck, we have a 10-cost 12,000 power Big Mom. On play, Dawn -4, you may trash 1 card from your hand and then add it to 1 card from the top of your deck to the top of your life cards, then set the base power of up to one of your opponent's characters to 0 during this turn. This is, I think, the only 10 cost to come out of all of the starter decks. Yet again, another Big Mom that's pretty impactful immediately. I think this card is a must include in purple Katakuri, definitely a must include in purple Yellow Pudding. It can also be included in a lot of other purple decks as well. It's not leader locked, it's not type locked. It can just be a generically good 10 cost purple character that heals you and then also allows you to trade into the opponent's board. I think this card will have a lot of impact as sets go along. I think this one and also the Borsalino are probably some of the best cards to come out of all of the starter decks. So this one you're definitely going to want to get a playset of as soon as you can because of the fact that I think it's just versatile in many other purple decks. And then finally we have a 3-cost 4,000 power Baron and Peckhams. It's a when attacking Dawn -1, KO up to one of your opponent's characters with 2,000 base power or less. Yet again, seeing hate against some of the smaller characters here. So I think what Bandai ended up seeing was that they made a mistake with purple Enel and maybe green blue Luffy, and we're like, we need ways to answer this in other decks. So they printed a bunch of this hate, which is good for these decks that really didn't have a way to interact with the board other than swinging into the opponent's characters. This card is solid. It's a 2k counter that has playability. So I think it's very limited in how you could play it, although it isn't leader or type locked. So you might want to consider it in other purple decks, but you're likely going to see this in purple Katakuri alone. Some decks that you can upgrade with the purple Katakuri starter deck include Hannibal. This leader likes to get to 10 as fast as possible and then play some big characters that impact the board or also impact the game state in general. So having access to 10 cost Big Mom could be a pretty good card to include in this deck. The same thing also applies to purple black Luffy from OP09. The fact that his leader ability says when 2 or more Dawn cards are returned to your Dawn deck from play, you get one of them as active and one of them is rested. So the 10 cost Big Mom that's Dawn -4 is actually a Dawn -2 with this ability. And I think the deck that actually benefits the most from this starter deck coming out, it's arguable. It's either between purple Katakuri or purple Yellow Pudding, but I think purple Yellow Pudding takes better advantage of it just in the meta state right now, just because of the fact that purple and yellow have really strong cards right now. Obviously yellow with Borsalino and then purple with Mamoraga. Pudding can use both of those cards and then also have access to the 10 cost Big Mom. I think when block rotation rotated out the 10 cost Big Mom that healed and then trashed to life, this definitely hurt this deck specifically, but having another big bomb to be able to play in its place helps this deck get back on the map. Out of the box, I think purple Katakuri might be the strongest deck out of all of the starter decks, just because of the fact it has access to the 10 cost Big Mom. Healing and then also getting rid of an opponent's character in the same turn is quite the tempo swing. Unfortunately, it doesn't have access to the 8 cost blocker Katakuri in the starter deck. Otherwise, I think this one might be a little bit too powerful for a starter deck tournament, but this one is probably the deck that I'm going to consider taking to a starter deck tournament if I can choose. And as far as the impact on the meta goes, I don't think that this deck, and I don't think any of the decks really will have too much of an impact on the immediate meta. We'll have a couple of weeks to play with them until OP17 comes out, and then once OP17 comes out, I think that it's going to be a just complete revamp of what we see in the meta. But I think that Katakuri and Pudding will have some impact on the meta. I think that some life will be renewed into them, and we'll probably see them appear from time to time, but probably not do anything too crazy as far as regionals or treasure cups go. Onto the yellow starter deck. This is meant to revamp Eustace Kid from OP10. His leader ability says, end of your turn, you may turn the top card of your life cards face up, set up to one of your 3 to 8 cost characters with the Supernova type as active, then that character gains blocker until the end of your opponent's next turn. I think when this leader came out, he immediately was pretty strong, but we saw him fall off pretty much right after that, and I'm not entirely sure if the starter deck is going to help bring him back into the meta, but it at least provides a lot of support specifically for him. Looking at the reprints, I think based off of the value that we're getting from the yellow Kid starter deck, this one is probably going to be worth your money at least because of the fact that you have access to the 4 cost Law 2k counter, the 3 cost X-Drake 2k counter, and then also the 1 cost 4-cost Luffy Searcher. All 3 of these cards are somewhat played in the meta, more specifically the 4-cost Law and the 3-cost X-Drake in purple, yellow, Rosinante. And I think that 4-cost Law is a promo that for the longest time was really expensive to get, and with the starter deck, it'll probably bring that price down. It probably already has, for that matter of fact, but I think based off of value, off of the starter decks we've seen so far, this one is going to be, for reprint at least, is going to be the best for your money. Onto the new cards, we have a 3-cost 3000 power Cavendish 2K counter that says on KO, you may trash 1 card from your hand, add up to 1 card from the top of your deck to the top of your life cards. This is a very good card for Yellow Kid specifically because you can give this blocker, block with it, and then heal off of it. Outside of this deck, I don't think that this card is going to have a lot of impact. Then for one of the SRs, we have a 4-cost 6000 power Killer. Your turn on play. If your leader has the Kid Pirates type, you may add up to 1 card from the top of your deck to the top of your life cards, and then trigger if your opponent has 3 or less life, play this card. A couple of great effects there. The first one being able to heal whenever you're able to play this out on your turn. Really strong, but it's only applying to Kid Pirates types, and there's only, I believe, 1 yellow Kid Pirates type leader, so this is very specifically locked to that. The trigger ability, if your opponent has 3 or less life, play this card, is pretty solid overall, but I think there's better options currently in the meta. Kiku Nojo immediately comes to mind there. This Scratchman Apu 2K counter is a vanilla character, but has a trigger that says draw 1 card, then your leader with the Supernovas type becomes 7000 base power during this turn. There's a couple of yellow Supernova leaders out there that could use this, Green Yellow Law being one of them, obviously Yellow Kid. Black Yellow Luffy could also use this as well, but I think that it's going to have the most use out of Green Yellow Law and then also Yellow Kid. This Barto is also a pretty nice inclusion in the starter deck. On play, you may discard 1 card with the Supernova trait from your hand and then draw 2 cards, so further digging to the deck is very nice. We're seeing a lot of these cards come into the meta in general, with the starter deck 30, Luffy and Ace getting, I believe it is Ivankov, and then also with Kinemon in the green starter deck, being able to discard draw 2, pretty nice overall. And then the other SR, the starter deck, is a 6-cost 7000 power Kid that says on your opponent's attack once per turn, you may turn the top or bottom of your life cards face down, change the target of that attack to one of your Eustace Captain Kid cards with a base power of 5000 or more, and then activate main once per turn. You may turn the top or bottom of your life cards face up, give up to 1 of your Rested Dawn cards to your leader. This card is, I think, very impactful for Yellow Kid. I think it's also pretty interesting in other decks outside of Kid because of the fact that it's not leader locked, it's not type locked. The on opponent's attack, you can redirect the attack into this card. The abilities to turn your life cards face up or face down are pretty impactful in other decks like Blue, Yellow, Ace, although I don't think we'll see this card in there, but there are ways that you can play this outside of just the Yellow Kid deck, but it's probably the best fit for that deck specifically. Some decks that you can upgrade with the Yellow Kid starter deck include Blue, Yellow, Nami. I think that the 6-cost Kid could actually find its way into that deck because it puts Dawn onto your leader, and on top of that, it acts as a defensive tool, so if your opponent wants to attack into you, you can always redirect it into that Kid. Red, Yellow, Sabo can actually use that Kid pretty efficiently as well, putting the Dawn underneath himself, and then also putting that card to life can be effective, but I don't think that this leader is going to really impact the meta in general, but it is worth at least noting you can upgrade this deck with that card. I also think that Green, Yellow, Law benefits from this deck as well. It benefited from the green starter deck, and it also benefits from the yellow starter deck, so pretty good for this deck to have a couple of decks come out and also buff it in general. The fact that this deck plays around Supernova type characters means that the yellow Supernova type deck fits really well with this. There's a lot of good support here. I think that Law, the core of this deck doesn't change too much, but I think that it will become more consistent based off of the cards that we have here. And the deck that benefits the most from this starter deck coming out is, of course, Kid himself. I think that every card that is presented, at least the new cards that are presented for this leader, you are able to use every bit of those effects, whereas like, for instance, Green, Yellow, Law, using the 6-cost 7000 power Kid, you can do, but you're not really running the 8-cost 9000 power Kid in that deck, and I think being able to redirect into a bigger Kid, which you can do in this deck, is very beneficial. So because this leader is using the full effect of every one of their cards that is new, I think this leader comes out on top. Out of the box, I think that this deck is probably one of the weaker decks to play at a starter deck tournament, so I wouldn't consider running this, although maybe some people would argue with me there. I do think that the impact of the cards on this meta also aren't going to really be that impactful either, because of the fact that most of these are going to be really impactful for Yellow Kid, but I do like the fact that we are getting some reprints in this deck that are worth some value, and on top of that, if you're a Yellow Kid enthusiast, this deck really is buffed because of the starter deck. And then finally, we have the red-black starter deck, which is benefiting Sabo from OP13. If you have 4 or more life cards, give this leader minus 1000 power, and then Dawn ×1. If you have a character with a cost of 8 or more, all of your characters and leader gain 1000 power. It's a dual color 5 life leader, which is also a little bit more unique there. As far as the starter deck goes, I kind of question why it was even printed to begin with, although I think what they're trying to do here is give more flexibility in the playstyle of black red Sabo, but I'm not entirely sure it really benefits this deck overall. We'll go over that right now though. Looking at the reprints, nothing really worth of value and not really anything that you're going to want to run in the core of red black Sabo as is. I do think that the 1 cost counter event's pretty strong in the deck, and the 4 cost promo Sabo blocker are also pretty good includes and auto includes in the deck in general, but I don't think those cards are incredibly overpriced. If anything, the 4 cost promo might be a little bit more expensive, but even then, because this leader is not very prevalent in the meta, I don't think that these cards are going to be worth a lot of money. If you're looking to immediately just buy into a bunch of staples for the deck, I don't even consider a lot of these staples for the deck, so this one is a little bit lost on me, but let's go over some of the new cards here. Starting off with the 4 cost 4000 power 1k counter blocker hack. On play, KO up to one of your opponent's characters with 2000 base power or less. I think this card is solid as is, but there are going to be other 4 cost characters like the promo blocker Sabo that you're going to want to include instead. Your curve with this deck is very tight, and as a result, you don't really have time to play this other than your forward on turn, and you're probably going to want to play the promo Sabo blocker instead. Next, we have a 4 cost 4000 power 2k Lindbergh. On play, give up to one of your opponent's characters minus 3000 power during this turn. I don't really see this being ran in black red Sabo, but it could be. I think it belongs probably in other decks instead, if that, but even then, I don't really see this card having too much play. Then we have a 3 cost 4000 power 2k counter Karasu. When attacking, you may trash 2 cards from the top of your deck. If your opponent has 7 or more cards in their hand, your opponent trashes 1 card from their hand. I do like this effect. I wish that the when attacking was an on play instead, so you can get immediate value. At least your opponent can answer this if you are able to play this down. And in black red Sabo, I'm really not playing this down, but as you can see, there's a lot of 4000 power body characters that they're introducing as new cards. So what I think they're trying to do here for black red Sabo is make it more of a go low to the ground deck, as opposed to have tall characters that apply a lot of pressure, which I don't necessarily agree with, but it does add flexibility with how you can play this leader. With this Karasu though, I do think that it belongs in other decks outside of black red Sabo. Onto the SRs, we have the 7 cost 6000 power Koala. It says this character gains blocker and +1 cost, and then on play, give up to 1 Rested Dawn card to your leader, then play up to 1 Rev Army type character card with 4000 power or less from your hand or trash. So this, of course, being able to play any of the 4000 power characters that we saw previously, but also being able to buff itself to an 8 cost means that your leader ability is online, so that all the 4000 power characters become 5000 power instead. So pretty good card for that low to the ground type of build, but I don't really think that this belongs in black red Sabo. I don't think there's really any need to change how the deck composition is right now, but the flexibility once again is nice. And then finally, we have a 5 cost 5000 power 1k counter Kuma that says this character gains +3 cost. So yet again, being an 8 cost character, hitting that black red Sabo stipulation. On play, give up to 1 Rested Dawn card to your leader, and then play up to 1 Rev Army type character with 4000 power or less from your hand or trash. Yet again, bringing out another small body. So I think they're trying to change the identity of this leader to be a little bit more lower to the ground. I keep saying it, but I think that's the approach that they're wanting us to take with this leader, although I don't really agree with that. Some leaders that you can upgrade with the starter deck include Bello Betty from OPO5. Because she plays a lot of Rev Army type characters, this could be a deck you could improve with some of the red Rev Army cards. I think Gecko Moria is a leader you could experiment with the 3 cost Karasu, being able to fill up your trash and then also force your opponent to discard. And then with your leader ability, being able to buff it by 1000 power means that it can swing in for 5000 power without any Dawn investment. So Gecko Moria could use that card. I think Lucy is a deck that could benefit from the starter deck as well. The 4 cost hack blocker, being a Dressrosa type character means that you can play it off of Memento, and it also comes in and immediately gets rid of a body on the opponent's side of the field. So of course, against decks like Green Blue Luffy or Purple Enel, when they start to get a wide board established, being able to answer at least one of those and then block another for the next turn is pretty impactful there. And then I think the winner from this Sabo starter deck coming out is actually Koala. I think that they can use both the Kuma and also the 7 cost Koala pretty well in this deck, go wide, and then also have access to good yellow stuff as well. So I think Koala probably comes out on top based off of the starter deck, but even then, I don't think that the deck is vastly improved because of the starter deck coming out. Out of the box, I think that this one is probably the weakest out of them. It's either a tie between Yellow Kid or Black Red Sabo. Both of these decks will get overwhelmed pretty easily with the mid-range to tall end type of characters that the other decks have. So if you're going to a starter deck battle, I would probably not choose Sabo or Yellow Kid. As far as the impact goes on the immediate meta, I don't think that this starter deck is going to really impact too much. And as far as the longevity goes as well, I don't even think that the SRs that are provided in the starter deck have too much playability outside of the archetype that they are structured for. So I don't really think that this starter deck is doing too much for the meta or for the black-red Sabo deck itself. It feels more like a filler deck in the meantime, but you never know what Bandai has planned down the road, so maybe some of these cards could be pretty impactful later on. So there you have it. There's a rundown of all of the starter decks coming out July 31st. Overall, I don't think that the meta is going to be insanely impacted by these starter decks coming out as opposed to other metas when other starter decks have come out, but I do think that there are a couple of sneaky cards in there that could provide some good value over time, so make sure to get those singles at least if you're going to go that route. With that being said, let me know in the comments below which starter deck are you guys looking forward to the most. Love to hear about that, and as always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video.